My sister said Mom didn't want me at her memorial. Then the choir director marked my name on verse 2. At 9:12 on Tuesday morning, the choir director placed my mother's music folder between us and said, "Before your sister changes anything else, you need to see this." Less than 12 hours earlier, my sister Claire had told me I was not welcome at our mother's memorial service. She had said it gently. That somehow made it worse. Mom wanted it small, Daniel. Peaceful. She was very clear that she didn't want you there. I had asked her to repeat it. Not because I hadn't heard, because when someone tells you that your mother used one of her final lucid moments to exclude you from her funeral, your mind searches for a different arrangement of the words. There wasn't one. Now I was sitting in the empty sanctuary of St. Mark's Church, while Ruth Calder, who had directed its choir for 27 years, opened a faded blue folder to the hymn my mother had chosen. The title was printed across the top. Underneath it were 3 verses covered with pencil marks, breathing notes, and small corrections in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. Beside the second verse, in blue ink, she had written, "Daniel begins verse 2. Then, beneath that, Michael joins after the first line, and in the margin, underlined twice, do not let either of them sing alone." I stared at the name Michael until the letters blurred. Michael was my 37-year-old son. I had not heard his voice in 6 years. "When did she write this?" I asked. "Last Thursday," Ruth said. "I was there." My mother died Monday night. Claire had told me that Mom's decision to keep me away had been made in her final days. Both things could not be true. Ruth turned the page. A rehearsal schedule was clipped behind the music. Wednesday, 7 p.m. Daniel Hale, verse 2. Michael Hale, verse 2. At the bottom was my mother's shaky signature. The memorial was Thursday morning, 48 hours away. And, according to the paper in front of me, my dead mother had planned to put me beside the son I had driven out of my life and make us sing together in front of everyone we knew. I closed the folder. Claire said Mom didn't want me at the service. Ruth's expression changed, but she didn't look surprised. "Your mother asked for you by name," she said, "and yesterday morning Claire called me and removed it. My mother, Margaret Hale, died at 8:41 on Monday night. I know the exact time because I was standing at my kitchen sink when Claire called. There was a glass in my hand and water running over my fingers. Claire didn't cry. She had already spent most of her tears during the 18 months she cared for Mom through congestive heart failure, 2 hospitalizations, and the slow reduction of a strong woman's world to 1 hospice room. "She's gone," Claire said. I turned off the water. "Were you with her?" "Yes." "Was she awake?" There was a pause. "Not at the end." I leaned against the counter. I was 61 years old, but in that moment I felt 9, waiting for my mother to come home from the night shift at the hospital. I asked when the service would be. That was when Claire told me not to come. At first, she blamed the size of the chapel. Then, she said Mom wanted only the people who had been part of her daily life. When I reminded her that I had visited every Sunday, she finally stopped circling the truth. She didn't want tension, Claire said. She knew Michael was coming. That was the first time I'd heard my son's name spoken by a family member in years. "Michael is coming?" "He visited her recently." "How recently?" "Daniel, please don't do this." "Do what? Ask when my son came back?" "Turn her death into your fight with him." I told her I wouldn't. She said Mom didn't believe that. Then came the sentence I couldn't stop hearing. She was very clear that she didn't want you there. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room with the lights off, looking at a photograph taken on Mom's 70th birthday. Claire stood on one side of her, and I stood on the other. Michael was behind us with his hands on our shoulders. That photograph was 11 years old. In it, none of us knew how completely a family could break without a single person leaving the room. At 7:38 the next morning, Ruth Calder called. She said she needed to confirm whether I was attending Wednesday's rehearsal. I thought she had the wrong Daniel. She asked me to meet her at the church. That was how I ended up staring at my mother's handwriting beside the second verse. "What exactly did Claire say when she called?" I asked. Ruth folded her hands. "She said your mother's instructions had changed." "Did she say when?" "No." "Did you ask?" "Yes." Ruth opened a small black notebook. "Choir directors, I learned that morning, keep records with the seriousness of air traffic controllers. Claire called at 7:06 yesterday morning," she said. "She asked me to cancel your part, remove one chair from the front row, and tell Michael that the duet was no longer happening. Mom was still alive at 7 yesterday morning." "Yes." "Did you speak to Mom after that?" Ruth hesitated. "At 4 in the afternoon, by phone, briefly." "What did she say?" "She asked whether both names were still on verse 2. The silence in the church felt enormous. "And what did you tell her?" "I told her I would make sure no one sang alone." I stood so quickly that the pew creaked behind me. "Then Claire lied." "Daniel," Ruth said, "I showed you the page because I believe you have a right to know what your mother planned. I did not show it to you so you could storm into your sister's house. What would you call what she did? I would call it something you don't understand yet." That answer made me angrier because it sounded like something my mother would have said. I took a photograph of the page. Then I drove to Claire's house. Her porch was covered with foil pans, flower arrangements, and sympathy cards. People always bring food when someone dies because grief is invisible, and a casserole is not. Claire opened the door before I knocked. She looked exhausted. Her gray hair was tied back carelessly, and she wore the same navy sweater she had worn at the hospice the previous week. "Ruth called you," she said. "You told me Mom didn't want me there. Come inside. Did she write my name beside the hymn?" Claire looked past me toward the street. "Come inside, Daniel." I followed her into the kitchen. Mom's purse sat on a chair. Seeing it there hurt more than the flowers had. Claire moved a stack of papers away from the table but did not ask me to sit. I put my phone in front of her and opened the photograph. "Last Thursday," I said. Ruth watched her write it. Claire barely glanced at the screen. "Mom had a lot of ideas last week. She asked about it 4 hours before she died. That reached her. Her face tightened. Ruth had no right to discuss Mom's last call with you. I'm her son. You remembered that on Sundays." The words landed exactly where she intended. For 18 months, Claire had handled the medication lists, the midnight calls, the insurance forms, and the endless arguments with the oxygen company. I drove Mom to cardiology appointments when I could. I repaired the ramp at Claire's house. I brought groceries every Sunday and sat with Mom for 2 hours. I had called that participation. Claire had called it visiting. "This isn't about who did more," I said. "It is always about who did more when the person who did less arrives with questions." "You told me my mother rejected me." Claire sat down. For the first time, she looked less angry than frightened. "Mom wanted to force you and Michael to perform a reconciliation at her funeral. She wanted us to sing one verse. She wanted him beside you. She wanted a letter opened. She wanted everyone to watch the two of you finish a story she should have dealt with 6 years ago. What letter? Claire looked away. That was the moment I knew the hymn was only the first secret. What letter? I asked again. It belongs to Michael. Who wrote it? She pressed her lips together. I already knew. My wife Elise had been dead for 6 years, and whatever destroyed my relationship with our son began in the last week of her life. Elise wrote something? I said. Claire stood and started gathering papers that did not need gathering. Ask Michael. I don't know how to reach him. That's not my fault. No, but apparently you do. She turned to face me. He came for his grandmother, Daniel, not for you. Mom called him in March. They spoke several times. He visited her 3 times last week. Every time he asked whether you would be there. And what did you tell him? That I would keep the room calm. That is not an answer. It is the only answer you need. She said Michael had agreed to attend the memorial only if there was no confrontation. She said he had a wife now, a 5-year-old daughter, and a life in Columbus that did not include me. The granddaughter stopped me. I knew Michael had married a woman named Leah. I had seen a photograph online 2 years earlier before his account disappeared from public view. I did not know I had a granddaughter. What is her name? I asked. Claire's expression softened for half a second. Then it closed again. That is exactly why I did this, she said. You hear one fact, and suddenly Mom's memorial becomes the place where you demand 6 years back. What is her name? Sophie. I gripped the back of a chair. Sophie. A person existed who had my mother's eyes, perhaps, or Elisa's laugh. A child who might have walked past me in a grocery store without either of us knowing. Mom knew? Yes. How long? Since Sophie was born. Another secret. Another room in my family's life where everyone had been invited except me. I picked up my phone. I'm going to the memorial. Claire stepped between me and the door. If you walk in there angry, Michael will leave. Did he say that? He didn't have to. Did he say that? She didn't answer. I left. My next stop was Bennett Funeral Home. I told myself I was going to confirm the time of the service. That was partly true. The coordinator, a young man named Owen, recognized my last name and offered condolences. When I said there seemed to be confusion about the family seating, he pulled up a chart on his monitor. There were 6 chairs in the first row. The labels read Claire, Robert, Anna, Michael, Leah, and Sophie. Robert was Claire's husband. Anna was their daughter. My name was not there, but Owen frowned at the screen. This plan was revised yesterday, he said. What was there before? He clicked twice. The earlier version had 7 chairs. My name was between Claire and Michael. Who removed it? Owen became careful. Your family representative requested the change. Claire. He nodded. What time? 7:14 yesterday morning. 8 minutes after she called Ruth. My mother was alive. My name was still on her hymn, my chair was still beside my son, and Claire was erasing both. Was anything else changed? Owen checked the notes. A sealed envelope was removed from the lectern package. I leaned toward the screen. Who was it addressed to? He read silently, then looked at me. Daniel and Michael Hale. Claire had not merely prevented a scene. She had dismantled a plan. One name, one chair, one envelope at a time. I drove to the hospice that afternoon to collect the small box of Mom's belongings Claire had said she did not want. Her room had already been cleaned. The bed was stripped, the oxygen machine gone, the photographs removed. Only the pale squares on the wall showed where they had been. A nurse named Marta brought me a cardboard box. Inside were Mom's reading glasses, peppermint candies, a knitted shawl, 2 library books, and the hand lotion she had used for as long as I could remember. At the bottom was a thin guest book. Mom had asked every visitor to sign it because, as she told me, if I'm going to forget what day it is, I refuse to forget who showed up. I sat in a chair by the window and turned through the pages. My name appeared on 4 Sundays. Claire's appeared almost every day. Then, 6 days before Mom died, Michael Hale, 3:10 p.m., under his name, in handwriting that slanted the same way mine did. She still cheats at gin. 4 days before she died, Michael and Leah, 11:45 a.m. Thank you for telling Sophie the truth about her middle name. 2 days before she died, Michael, 5:20 p.m. I'll try the second verse. I can't promise the rest. I read that sentence 3 times. Marta stood quietly near the door. Did my mother sing with him? I asked. A little, she said. Your son has a good voice. He got that from his mother. The answer came automatically. Marta smiled. Margaret said the same thing. I looked again at the final entry. Did she give him a letter? Marta's smile disappeared. I can't discuss another visitor's private conversation. I'm not asking what they said. She hesitated. Your mother kept an envelope in the drawer beside her bed. On Sunday, it was gone. Did Claire take it? I don't know. I closed the book. As I did, a folded slip of paper fell from the back cover. There was a phone number on it. No name. Just the letter M. The area code was from Columbus. My hands began to shake. For 6 years, I had imagined the first words I would say if Michael ever called. Most versions were speeches. Some were accusations. 1 or 2, on the loneliest nights, began with, I'm sorry. I had never imagined I would be the one calling. I entered the number and stood by the hospice window while it rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then a man answered. Hello? 1 word. 6 years collapsed inside it. His voice was deeper, but it was still the voice that had called me from college after his first car accident. The voice that had read a poem at Elise's 40th birthday. The voice that had said in a hospital corridor, she asked me to help her, Dad. Michael? Silence. Dad? I closed my eyes. I found your number in Grandma's guest book. Another silence. Aunt Claire said you didn't want it. Claire told me Mom didn't want me at the memorial. He exhaled slowly. She told me you refused to come if I was there. For a moment, neither of us spoke. There are lies so large they require planning. And there are lies made from one small change in each person's version of events. Claire had chosen the second kind. Did you refuse to sing? I asked. No. Did you say you would leave if I came? No. His voice hardened. I said I wouldn't let Grandma use her funeral to trap us. I told Claire I would sing if you knew the truth and chose to be there. What truth? You don't know about the letter. I know Elise wrote it. He gave a short, humorless laugh. Of course, Claire kept that part, too. Do you have it? Yes. Have you read it? 3 times. I pressed my palm against the cold glass. What does it say? Not over the phone. Michael, no, You don't get to order this part." The old anger rose in me so quickly it was almost comforting. Then I saw the guest book open on my mother's empty bed. I lowered my voice. "You're right." He was quiet. "That may be the first time I've heard you say that," he said. "It may be the first time I meant it." He almost laughed. I heard it start and disappear. We agreed to meet at a diner near the church at 5. Before he hung up, I asked one question. "Sophie, is that your daughter?" His breathing changed. "Claire told you. Only her name. Then that's all you know for now." It hurt, but I had spent 6 years teaching my son how to live without me. I could not resent him for learning. Michael was already in a booth when I arrived. He stood as I approached, then seemed to regret it. He looked older, of course. There was gray at his temples and a pale scar near his chin I had never seen. But when he put one hand in his pocket, he became 17 again, waiting for me to decide whether his explanation was good enough. I sat across from him. For several seconds, we studied the menus. Neither of us ordered food. He placed a cream-colored envelope on the table. My name was written across it in Elise's hand. Daniel. No one had written my name that way since she died. "Grandma kept this for 6 years, Michael said. "Why?" "She said Mom gave it to her the day before she died. She was supposed to give it to you after the funeral." "She didn't." "No. Why give it to you now?" "Because she knew she was running out of time, or because guilt finally became more uncomfortable than silence." I touched the edge of the envelope. "Did you know it existed?" "Not until last Thursday." "You believed I had read it?" "For the first year, yes." His answer cut deeper than I expected. "And after that, I decided it didn't matter. It mattered to me." Michael's eyes lifted. "Everything mattered to you except what Mom asked for." The diner sounds seemed to recede. 6 years earlier, Elise's ovarian cancer stopped responding to treatment. There was another trial in Cleveland. I found the doctor. I gathered the records. I called everyone I knew. I believed action was love. Elise was tired. She tried to tell me, but every time she began a sentence with, "If this doesn't work," I answered with what we would try next. Michael listened when I couldn't. He helped her sign the hospice papers. He witnessed her advance directive. And when the hospital called to tell me she had declined transfer for another treatment, I learned that my son had known for 3 days. I confronted him in the corridor outside her room. He said, "She asked me to help her stop." I heard, "You helped her die." I told him he had betrayed me. He said it was not my decision. I said something no father should ever say. "If you can do this behind my back, don't call yourself my son." Elise died 4 days later. Michael came to the funeral but stood at the back. I watched him leave and did nothing. For 6 years I told myself he had chosen distance. Now his mother's letter sat between us. "Read it," he said. My finger slid under the flap. The letter was only 2 pages. Elise wrote that she had asked Michael to keep her hospice decision from me until she could find the courage to say it herself. She wrote that it was unfair to him. She wrote that my refusal to discuss death had turned every conversation into another promise she was too tired to keep. She wrote, "Daniel, you will think our son took hope away from me. He didn't. He gave me a place where I could tell the truth without having to protect you from it." Then came the line that broke something in me. "Do not make Michael carry the anger that belongs to both of us." I read the sentence again. Elise did not excuse herself. She did not excuse me. She said she should have been honest sooner and I should have listened sooner. At the end, she asked me to forgive Michael for keeping a promise he never should have been asked to make. "Grandma had this the whole time?" I said. Michael nodded. "She said she was afraid giving it to you right after the funeral would destroy you." "So she waited 6 years?" "She said every month made the next month harder." I folded the letter along its old creases. "Why didn't you call me?" Michael looked through the window. "I did." "When?" "3 weeks after the funeral. You blocked my number." I remembered. I'd seen his name on the screen and pressed a button before it rang twice. "I wrote," he continued, "2 letters. One came back unopened. I gave the other to Grandma. She never gave it to me. Apparently, holding letters was one of her talents. I deserved that." The waitress brought 2 coffees we had not ordered. Michael thanked her. His voice softened in a way it never had with me. "Does Leah know you're here?" I asked. "Yes." "Does Sophie?" He looked at me carefully. "She knows I'm saying goodbye to great-grandma. Does she know I exist? She knows I have a father I don't see. What did you tell her about why?" "That adults can love each other and still hurt each other badly enough to stay apart." It was kinder than the truth I had told myself. I placed the letter on the table. "Are you going to sing tomorrow?" "Are you?" "I don't know. That's honest, at least." I felt the old urge to defend myself, to remind him I had lost a wife, that grief had made me cruel, that he had kept a life-changing decision from me. All of those things were true. None of them changed the 6 years after. "I was wrong in that hallway," I said. Michael's jaw tightened. "About which part?" "Telling you not to call yourself my son. You don't get 6 years back with one sentence." "I know." "Do you?" "I am starting to." He looked down at his coffee. "Grandma wanted verse 2 because it was the verse Mom used to sing while cooking," he said. "She thought if we remembered her at the same time, we might stop remembering only the worst thing we did to each other." "That sounds like Mom." "It also sounds manipulative." "That sounds like Mom, too." For the first time, we both smiled. It lasted less than a second. But it happened. Michael said he would come to the rehearsal on one condition: no speeches, no demands to meet Sophie, no public announcement that the family was healed. "We sing one verse for Grandma," he said. "After that, we decide what happens when no one is watching." I agreed. At 6:55 Wednesday evening, I walked into St. Mark's. Ruth had placed 2 chairs near the piano. Not 7, not 6, 2. Michael arrived a minute later, carrying the blue folder. We had barely reached the second line when the sanctuary doors opened. Claire stood there. She did not look surprised. She looked defeated. "Ruth," she said, "I canceled this." Ruth closed the piano lid. Margaret requested it. Margaret also said she wanted peace. Michael turned. "You told me Dad refused." Claire's eyes moved to me. "And you told him Mom excluded him," I said, "because neither of you would agree without conditions. You didn't give us the choice." "I gave everyone else a chance to bury my mother without watching the 2 of you reopen Elise's death." Her voice cracked on the word mother. That was the first moment I stopped seeing Claire as the person controlling the memorial, and saw the woman who had slept in a chair beside Mom for 9 of the last 14 nights. She walked down the aisle. "Do either of you know what her last week was like?" she asked. She was timing phone calls between morphine doses. She was making lists. She was trying to solve every mistake she had ever made before Thursday morning. and every person she called brought another secret into that room. Then you decided which wishes counted, I said. Yes. The honesty surprised me. Claire stood in front of us. Mom asked me to put that letter on the lectern, she said. She wanted it opened during the service. Michael's face changed. She told me we would read it privately. She told you what you needed to hear so you would come. Then Claire looked at me. She told you nothing because she thought surprise would keep you from saying no. I thought about the note in the margin. Do not let either of them sing alone. It looked less tender now. It looked like an order. Why remove me completely? I asked. Claire took a breath. Because Monday morning, Mom asked whether the letter would make you forgive Michael. I told her forgiveness wasn't hers to schedule. She got angry. 10 minutes later, she couldn't remember what day it was. That doesn't mean she changed her mind. No, it means she was dying, Daniel, and I had to decide whether to obey her plan or protect the people who would still be alive on Friday. Michael stepped closer. You could have told us. I tried telling you the duet was a bad idea. You said you would come only if Daniel chose it freely. I knew he would come angry if he learned about the letter. She was right about that. If Ruth had told me about the envelope before I called Michael, I might have arrived at the diner demanding answers instead of asking for them. But being partly right did not make Claire's lie harmless. You told me Mom didn't want me at her funeral, I said. You don't get to call that protection. Claire looked at the floor. No, she said, I don't. Ruth opened the piano again. Margaret planned too much, she said. Claire controlled too much, and both of you have said enough for one evening. She looked at Michael and me. Do you want to sing? Michael looked at me. For once, no dead woman, sister, letter, or choir director answered for us. One verse, I said. One verse, he agreed. My voice shook on the first line. Michael entered on the second. He did have his mother's voice. Not exactly. His was lower and rougher, but he held the end of a phrase the way Elise had, as if the last note deserved a little more time. I lost my place. Michael kept singing. Then I found it again. When we finished, no one applauded. Ruth simply said, again. The second time, I did not lose the words. Thursday morning arrived cold and bright. I parked 2 blocks from the church and sat in my car until 9:42. The service began at 10. I had promised Michael I would not turn my attendance into a confrontation. I had also promised myself I would not sneak into my mother's memorial as if I had done something shameful by surviving her. At 9:45, I walked through the front doors. Claire was near the flowers speaking with the funeral director. She saw me. Neither of us moved. Then she lifted one hand and pointed toward the front row. There were 7 chairs again. My name card sat between hers and Michael's. It was not forgiveness, it was a chair. Sometimes that is where repair starts. Michael arrived with Leah and Sophie a few minutes later. Leah shook my hand. She was courteous, not warm. I respected her for that. Sophie stood partly behind her mother. She had dark curls and serious brown eyes, Elise's eyes. Every part of me wanted to kneel, introduce myself, tell her I had photographs of her father at every age, ask what book she liked, and recover 5 years before the organ began. I did none of those things. "Hello, Sophie," I said. "Hello. I'm sorry about great-grandma," I added. She nodded. Michael watched me. I could not tell whether I had passed a test or merely avoided failing one. The service began. Claire delivered the eulogy. She spoke about Mom's 34 years as a nurse, her habit of carrying peppermints, and her belief that any problem could be improved by clean sheets and hot soup. She did not mention the family secrets. She did not mention the letter. When it was time for the hymn, Ruth looked toward us. My legs felt unsteady as I stood. Michael stood beside me. I began verse 2. My voice sounded smaller in the full church than it had during rehearsal. Then Michael joined, not behind me, beside me. Halfway through, I heard Claire singing from her chair, then Leah, then the rest of the room. My mother's final plan failed in one important way. She had tried to arrange a moment in which her son and grandson repaired 6 years of damage. That did not happen. What happened was quieter. We finished the verse without leaving. After the service, people formed a line to tell us how much Mom had meant to them. Sophie went with Claire's daughter to look at the stained glass windows. Leah stayed near them. Michael and I stood under the church awning. "You sounded like Mom," I said. "You always told me I couldn't carry a tune." I was wrong about that, too. He gave me a tired smile. Careful. Too much growth in 48 hours could be dangerous. I reached into my coat and handed him Elisa's letter. "This belongs to you." He shook his head. "She wrote it to you. She wrote it about both of us. Make a copy." He took it. Rain began tapping against the awning. "I'm not bringing Sophie to your house next weekend," he said. The sentence was so direct that I knew he had rehearsed it. I didn't ask. "You were going to. Eventually. This has to be slow." "I know." "No, Dad. Slow doesn't mean 2 coffees and then Christmas together. It means maybe I call you next week. Maybe you answer without telling me what I should do. Maybe in a month Leah decides she's comfortable meeting you again. Sophie comes much later." Every instinct in me wanted a schedule, dates, promises, proof that one verse had changed something. That was the same instinct that had made me answer Elisa's fear with another doctor, another treatment, another plan. "All right," I said. Michael studied my face. "All right. Call when you're ready." He nodded. Then he walked into the rain toward his wife and daughter. Claire found me in the church basement after everyone left. She was placing leftover cake into small cardboard boxes. I took the knife from her and began cutting while she folded. For several minutes, we worked without speaking. "I'm sorry," she finally said. I kept cutting. "For which part?" "Telling you Mom didn't want you. And the chair. And the chair. And telling Michael I refused?" She folded another box. "Yes." I set down the knife. "You knew I had a granddaughter for 5 years." Claire looked at me. "Michael asked me not to tell you." "Why?" "Because Sophie wasn't a message. She was a child. He didn't want news of her used as a bridge he wasn't ready to cross." I hated that answer. I also understood it. "You should have told me about the letter," I said. "Mom should have told you about the letter." "She's not here." "Exactly." Claire's voice sharpened. "So, all the anger goes to the person who stayed. Mom kept Elisa's letter for 6 years. Michael kept Sophie from you. You blocked his calls. I lied about the service. But I'm the one standing in this basement, so I'm the one you can punish. I'm not punishing you. Not yet." I thought about the Sundays I had visited Mom. 2 neat hours with groceries in my hands and an exit time in my head. Claire never had an exit time. That did not excuse what she had done, but love and resentment had occupied the same room inside her for a long time. "I'm angry," I said. You should be. I don't trust your version of what Mom wanted. You shouldn't, and I'm not going to pretend today fixed that. Claire closed the last box. Good. Good. I'm tired of this family pretending a ceremony changes facts. We carried the boxes upstairs together. 3 days passed before Michael called. The phone rang Saturday at 10:17 in the morning. I let it ring once. Then I answered. He told me Sophie had asked why I cried during the hymn. I asked what he had said. I told her I thought you missed Grandma. That was true. I also told her you probably miss my mother. That was true, too. There was a pause. Then Michael said, she wants to know if you have pictures of me when I was 5. I looked toward the hallway closet where 20 albums sat in plastic containers. A few hundred. Send me 5. Not a box, not an invitation. 5 photographs. I chose them carefully. One of Michael in a red raincoat, one asleep beside Elise on the couch, one holding a fish no larger than his hand, one on his first day of school, and one with Mom at the piano, both of them laughing because neither knew the next line. I sent them without a message. An hour later, a reply arrived. Sophie says the fish is too small to count. I laughed aloud in my empty kitchen. It was not reconciliation, it was 5 photographs. Sometimes that is where repair starts. Claire and I took longer. For several weeks, we spoke only about paperwork. Then, one afternoon, she brought me Mom's blue music folder. Ruth said you should keep it, she said. I opened to the second verse. Mom's instruction was still there. Do not let either of them sing alone. Claire stood beside me. Are you going to frame it? She asked. No. Why not? Because she was wrong about part of it. Claire waited. You can't order people not to be alone, I said. You can only tell them the truth and leave a chair. Claire looked at the page for a long time. I should have left the chair. Yes. I closed the folder. But I should have made it easier for Michael to sit in one 6 years ago. 3 months after the memorial, Michael met me for coffee again. 6 months later, I met Sophie properly at a public park. She brought the photograph of the fish and made me admit it had been too small to keep. Claire and I still argue about Mom. She remembers the woman gasping for breath at 2 in the morning. I remember the woman writing my name beside a hymn. Both women existed. So did the mother who kept a letter because she feared grief. So did the sister who lied because she feared conflict. So did the father who mistook action for listening. And so did the son who learned to protect his family by keeping his distance. None of us was the villain in every version. None of us was innocent in all of them. My mother did not repair us from beyond the grave. She left behind a mess of instructions, half-truths, and one honest sentence in the margin. The sentence could not make Michael forgive me. It could not give me back 6 years. It could not turn Claire's lie into love. But it made me walk into a church instead of staying home with the version of the truth someone else had chosen for me. And when my voice failed on the second verse, my son did not walk away. He kept singing until I found my place.